Hey guys, I am back doing yet another episode, and today is actually going to be a follow up from the binge eating podcast because that one seemed to get a lot of attention. A lot of people related to it. A good amount of people reached out to me and kind of shared their stories and similar struggles and whatnot, so that was really cool. So I had been planning to do a follow up episode, but I did also communicate that with some of my listeners. So um, I could hold myself accountable to do one, which is what this episode is. So it's about a week later from the time that I posted. The recording this now is about a week later. I'm probably going to end up posting this episode in about a week or so because I've got a few other episodes on deck that I've already recorded that I want to release. But this one will probably be coming out in about another week or two. Um, but for context, if you're listening, it's been about a week or so since I had the whole experience and realizations with the binge eating. And what I've been doing, well, first of all, knowing that I was doing this podcast was cool because it helped hold me accountable to really pay attention to my pattern and really try to be mindful, really pay attention to what I'm doing when I eat. So what I set out to do this past week or so, and I actually didn't even put a time frame on it. I didn't even say I'm going to do this for a week or I'm going to do this for a month or whatever. I just kind of I told myself that things would roll and I would know when I came to the next big realization or set of realizations in my journey, and I would know when that time would be. And that would be when I would create this episode. So what I've been doing is I've been taking a bunch of notes throughout my day as I've been watching myself with food and around food, and I've compiled them, kind of organized them, and now is the time to share them. It feels right. So what I set out to do, and I will just give you guys this warning, I did organize them to the best of my ability, but it may be a little bit choppy, so I'm going to do my best to kind of give a flow to this process, but it may be a little choppy just because I was taking notes on different days and whatnot. So when after I did the podcast and I set out to be mindful around food, I told myself that I would not be restrictive. So that was the first thing. I'm not going to restrict anything. But when I got the impulse to eat something, specifically something of pleasure, a treat of some sort, or a pleasure meal, or something other than plain fuel, that I would ask myself these questions. Am I hungry? Am I craving? Or am I neither? And I told myself I would eat when I'm truly hungry and make nourishing decisions, so decisions to fuel my body with food that was nourishing. If I was craving, then I was going to negotiate with the cravings and hopefully sometimes give in, or I shouldn't say hopefully give in, but sometimes give in and then sometimes say no, because I realize I need to learn to say no to myself. That's probably one of the one of the biggest pieces of this is learning how to say no to myself. So if I was hungry, I was going to eat always and make nourishing decisions. If I was craving, I was going to negotiate with the cravings. So sometimes say yes, sometimes say no. Try not to be a tyrant. And then if I was neither, so if I was not hungry or not craving, I was not going to eat when neither of those things are present. And believe it or not, as silly as it sounds, at least for me, I will still try to eat when I am not hungry or not craving. It's a very weird place that I'm in when I'm doing that, but it does exist. It is alive. It does happen. So I told myself to absolutely not eat like that, because usually I'm feeling like absolute garbage and I'm just trying to shovel anything and anything into my mouth at that point, just to get some sort of dopamine spike or some hit of pleasure, even when I'm just feeling sick. So I told myself, do not eat when I'm like that. And a couple other things that I tried to do, are things I always try to do, is focusing on slowing down the time between my bites, and then chewing my food completely. Now, I'm not sure if any of you have ever tapped into this before, but it is a completely different and transformational eating experience when you slow your bites down and you chew your food fully and thoroughly. I mean, it's a game changer. I haven't really practiced this until recently. And I mean, you taste food differently, your stomach feels different, you digest your food differently, you don't even really feel food in your stomach. I mean, for me personally, it changes the game. Um, it's very hard though, because when you mentally try to slow your eating down, it just feels foreign. It feels different. You're not used to it. But what I found is when you can kind of slow down the initial speed, if you're a fast eater like me, you can kind of slow it down initially, like your first 4 or 5 bites, like take 30 seconds in between each one. Your body will naturally kind of slow down with it. And then the rest of the eating experience, it will be easier to slow down. But if you just kind of start chomping away and going for it, then it's like it's just kind of, snowballs at that point. And then pretty soon, if you're like me, you blink and then you're done and you're like, what the hell happened? And you feel bloated and full and you didn't even experience your meal. It's not ideal to be there. And so I wanted to work on that. And then a couple other things too is working on not eating any sort of paleo treats or sweets of any sort in the first 3/4 of the day. Not eating 3 hours before bed, and then strategically drinking my water around my meals. So I hear that you're supposed to only drink your water 30 minutes before you eat and then wait until an hour after you eat to continue drinking. So those are always things that I'm constantly trying to do. Even though I'm not perfect, I don't always do it all the time. I know I feel so much better when I follow all of those rules, specifically the not eating close to bed. So I just try to do those things. So that's kind of what I wrote out to set out to do here. So the first kind of big part of this that I recall, or that I guess the part that's maybe interesting to share, right? Because there's so many little things in between that I just don't feel like would be useful to share. Like I could give you guys all the little micro things that happen, but it's just not interesting. So I just kind of took notes on the big stuff. So I think it was the first or second night after I set out to do this, I found myself wanting this chicken salad that I make. And I cut up all the food, I got ready to make it. But then as I was making it, I was like, I am not hungry. I'm craving this. I'm not hungry at all. Like I could totally go without eating this dinner. And actually it would be way better for me because the last time I ate that day was about 1 or 2 o'clock. And I'm like, you know what? I should probably do a 24-hour fast. I've been wanting to do another one. I've done a 3-day one before, but I've been wanting to do another one and I'd probably feel good. But I continued to prepare the meal and then I started like pouting almost with myself. I was like, this isn't fair. Like I want this meal, but what's making me not have this meal? Like if I can't get this meal, then I won't get the pleasure from it and I won't be able to taste it and I'll have to go to sleep without this. And it was like almost like a little childhood tantrum in my head, or a childlike tantrum. And it was really hard. I just was going back and forth negotiating because I was craving, right? So I'm like, I want this, no I don't. I want this, no I don't. I shouldn't have it, no I should. But then I decided to forego it. I'm like, I made the sacrifice and that was really cool to do. And it was really hard, but I'm like, I'm going to make this meal. I'm going to put it in the fridge and then I'm going to eat it tomorrow and it's going to taste great. And then I kind of observed that process in myself and I'm like, this is kind of what happens when I'm going to negotiate with a craving. It's important when you make a choice that you stick with it. Arguably, that's more important than anything, whether you make a choice in one way or the other. If you decide to move forward with it or if you decide to not move forward with it, it is way more important to stick with what you choose as opposed to the actual decision. Because if you stick with what you choose, so if you make a decision and stick with what you choose, then you end up trusting yourself. And the more that you make decisions like that and follow through with what you say, the stronger your trust becomes with yourself, the stronger that you build trust with yourself, and then you start to believe yourself, and then it just kind of spirals in a good direction. And so I realized once I make a decision, I'm making that decision, I'm sticking with it. If I'm battling a craving, you know what? I'm going to war. The deal is done once I've decided. I'm going to make it out. I believe that I'm going to make it out. And yeah, like I said, the worst thing you can do is decide and then act differently because you break that trust with yourself and you get farther from where you want to be. So I battled it out. I mean, I went to bed early that night. I was really tired, and I was just thinking about so many times going to get that salad that I really wanted. And I didn't. It was hard. Like I said, I was at war, but I woke up and I felt fine. And I went on through the morning. And that morning, I realized I really saw how much I take food for granted. Overabundance is really not a good thing, and not just with food, with everything in life, anything in life. It changes the game when you're actually hungry, when you actually need the food for fuel. I mean, your body is so excited and looking forward to getting the food as fuel that the taste is like another level, because you're hungry, you're accepting this food, it's nourishing, and it's like the taste is just out of this world when your body is in that state. I mean, just so different than when you have the overabundance and you're eating whatever you want whenever you want. And so I realized that, and I also realized that on a fast. That's an episode for a different day, but I've done a 3-day fast, and you really see your patterns around food when you give up food for 3 days. It's no easy feat. It is not an easy thing to do, but you realize a lot about yourself. And so delaying this meal, and then I made it about 22 hours, and I ate. I really started to think about how unhealthy my patterns are a lot of the other time. Like, it's just, this is how life is, right? You can't really see what you're doing until you don't do it anymore, and then you take a step back and you're like, holy shit, what was I doing? Like, I will walk into my pantry and take my sunflower butter, take a heaping spoonful of it, pour Lily's chocolate chips on there, pour some maple syrup or some other sweetener, and just put spoonfuls into my mouth and then walk away like it never happened. Like, that is not good. It is really not good. And we've talked about this before. Yeah, sure, the food is okay, right? The food is good quality. Like, the chocolate chips aren't bad. There's no sugar in there. There's natural sweeteners like coconut palm sugar, sunflower butter with no additives, good sweeteners, whatever. The food isn't bad, but it's the act of eating the food. It's like mindlessly walking to your pantry and then shoveling spoonfuls of whatever in your mouth and then walking away. That is the behavior that I'm trying to fix and restructure and recreate a healthy relationship with. And so delaying this meal just really helped me see how unhealthy my patterns were. And the difference between planned pleasure from overabundance, like when you're sitting there planning out meals, or, I mean, I don't know if anybody else is like as crazy as me. I sometimes feel like I'm the only one, but I mean, food literally my life revolves around it. Like, I'm not like this as much anymore, but at my peak, I would plan out literally my meals like days or longer in advance. Like, make sure I would cover all my bases. Like, I want to eat pizza today. Oh, that means I can eat burgers tomorrow. That means I'm going to be eating Mexican food the next day. And then all in there, I'm going to have to cover all the bases for dessert. So ice cream one day, cookies the next day, brownies the next day, certain cereal. I mean, it was insane. It was like just made up my life. And the food was horribly unhealthy too. So it was just like, I was just getting like just nailed. That's what it felt like, by this addiction. And I thought about the difference between planned pleasure from overabundance versus the pleasure generated from sacrifice. So both things are pleasurable, right? Like the meal that I ate after sacrificing the food for whatever it was, 22 hours after delaying that meal, there was a lot of pleasure in that, but a different pleasure than if I would have eaten it the night before. The night before, it would have given me pleasure too, but it would have been a cheaper, quicker pleasure with less depth. And by sacrificing, I experienced a deeper, more meaningful pleasure. And it just got me thinking about sacrifice, because the next event that I'm going to talk about was like a day or two later. I was thinking about my husband was going to take me out for my birthday. So the whole binging thing happened around my birthday weekend, but because we had the party that weekend, my husband planned to take me out for our own little private date the next weekend. And so I was thinking about that, and we're going to go to some paleo keto restaurant, which we did. But about 3 or 4 days before that, I was already thinking about planning like a binge for after that event, like coming back at night and saying, okay, I'm going to bake this, I'm going to bake that, I'm going to be able to eat this. And it really, it made me see my conditioning around experiences out. The tyrant, like I said last time, it goes on vacation. It's like the slave gets to come out and play, and I get to do whatever I want, and then I plan these things in advance, and it's a very weird thing where I'm going to go out and I'm going to have this meal, and then I'm already like planning ahead how I'm going to binge that day. Um, I struggle to have like a normal meal. Like I was looking at the weekend that day, that date with my husband. It's like, why can't I just, it's just a meal. It's like any other Saturday. It's, if I wake up on a Saturday and I make, salmon and sweet potatoes and a salad on the side, it's like that's literally in my mind what this meal out should be. We're just eating at a restaurant instead of at home, and it's just another meal, and then we go out and then we come back and then our lives go on. But for me, these meals out or vacations or day trips turn into excuses to binge, and I saw my pattern around that. So that was really interesting to observe. And then, the days kind of went on, or a day or two, and I decided to not eat treats for, I think it was like 2 days. And then I felt so sluggish one night, like just so horribly like tired and fatigued. And at this point, we're probably about 4 or 5 days in to the week or so. I felt so horribly tired, and I was craving chocolate mousse. This was at night. I was craving this coconut mousse that I make. It's just coconut milk, cacao powder, coconut palm sugar, and vanilla extract. I felt so tired though. I figured it was like carb withdrawal because I was trying to really eliminate the carbs and really go low carb. I tend to feel better if I can kind of stick it through with low carb. And so I just, I'm like, there's no restriction. I'm going to negotiate with myself in this craving, and I'm going to allow myself to have it. And so I gave in and I made it. I wanted to eat it mindfully. I did not eat it as mindfully as I hoped. But that was also a lesson in itself. I typically shoot to eat slow, but when the food touches my mouth, it's like I almost blank out. It's something, again, I'm working on too, but it's just what happens. But when I ate the mousse, I ate it until my stomach basically said, you're done. Well, if I'm being a little bit real, it was kind of past that point, but I was trying to stay as close to it as possible. But I stopped and I put it away. And when I made it, I asked my husband if he wanted any. He said no. So I put it away, and then he ended up wanting some later, of course, because that's always what happens, right? But when that happened, when I brought it out again to give some to him, to prepare it for him, my stomach usually kind of resets and I go for seconds. I don't know if you guys experience that, but when you're like eating and you feel so full, but then like 30 minutes later, you're like, ooh, I want some more. It's like story of my life. But I wanted to build the discipline, so I didn't have any seconds. Like I said before, it's the most important thing to whatever you decide on to stick with that. Like if you decide to go for it or don't go for it, whatever you tell yourself, try your best to stay on that path. So here's the interesting thing. The mousse gave me life. I felt fabulous. I felt great, probably too great. I was up until like 1 a.m. working on my website, but I felt great. I woke up the next day feeling great. And I kind of realized it was, I felt the dance was successful in that experience. I'm like, I didn't overindulge. I practiced disciplined, and I also indulged a little bit. Kind of had both ends of the spectrum there. And it was in that moment I realized, it's not really restricting completely, just cutting things out. It's just controlling how much and trusting myself to actually go through with that, with how much. It's something I've really never done before. And I actually kind of felt the sweet spot the negotiator. I gave my body and my mind what it craved and what it wanted, and I didn't overindulge. I didn't get sick. I gave it what it wanted. But another thing it kind of brought up, because in the coming days, like the day or two after I kind of introduced that chocolate again, and I felt great, I started eating more and more chocolate, and then I kind of reflected on my past with chocolate and realized chocolate's been a constant in my life, and I don't want to get into too much detail with this, but now I'm curious about my dependency around chocolate, and chocolate is a stimulant similar to coffee. I'm caffeine sensitive. I cannot do coffee. I literally go nuts. I have panic attacks. Seriously, it's horrible. I'm like horribly caffeine sensitive. Can't even have like half a cup. I just go crazy. I think I have like an Instagram story, like actually going crazy when I drink caffeine once. I tried it for the first time, like in a couple of years, and it was just not good. But chocolate is a stimulant as well, and it works the same way for me. In a way, it can kind of provoke the adrenals, get some adrenaline going, and I had a lot of chocolate the past couple of days, and now we're coming up to about a week. So me doing this episode right now. So the last couple of days, I've had a lot of chocolate. I've been curious about my chocolate addiction, or about a chocolate addiction, even if it's not physical, maybe psychological. And last night it was kind of weird. I like was laying down to go to bed, and I had like half of a chocolate bar right before bed, and I was eating it, and I'm like literally eating it in real time. Like, Ashley, what the fuck are you doing? I like it's like you know that this, like, I don't want to say it like this, but I'm going to. It breaks all the rules. Like, I know this. And what I mean by rules, though, that sounds tyrannical, but it's like, I know I'm going to feel like shit. Like, I know I shouldn't be eating a chocolate bar right before bed. And then what happened? I try to go to sleep. I had all these racing thoughts, all this paranoia. Like, what happens when you have sweeteners before bed, or chocolate or stimulants? I was having all these crazy thoughts, like I'm gonna die one day, and everybody I know are gonna die, and like all this like all this just paranoia in my mind. And I don't know, it was interesting. There's so much there, and I know I'm kind of rambling. I'm up and down. I'm going on about all these different things I'm realizing and seeing, and as much as it sounds like it's chaotic, as you're probably listening to me, it is even more chaotic up here in my head. What goes on in my head with the experimentation around food is insane, and I know that's probably part of the problem. I know I'm deeply analytical, and that it can be a kryptonite, because you can analyze yourself too much. It can become a problem, and I'm aware of that, and sometimes I just go on and on and on. And then I'm like, maybe I should just live a little bit. But then, historically, I kind of live a little bit, and then I go off the rails, and I have no discipline. And that's why it brings me back to this space of trying to find the discipline, but not be too tyrannical, and learning how to play nice with myself. So that was a lot. I wrote out some takeaways. Almost done here. And from this experience, the past couple of weeks trying to be mindful and trying to negotiate, I realized, it's really hard to pay attention to yourself, like, really closely as life goes on. As life happens, as you're in your day, as you're just going on and on, first you start because something happens, you have a realization, or you have some sort of event or thing that happens that sparks you to pay more attention. But then it kind of fades, the charge fades, and life gets in the way, and then you start giving into the impulses. And the only way around this that I can think of so far is to have some sort of like prompt or something cueing you in your day to check in about food and hold yourself accountable, like every day, if not multiple times a day. Another thing is, for me at least, I need to have a plan inside of a plan. So what that means is I need to have a bigger and overall plan. So what are my goals? Because, there are larger themes to eating. Like, something I've been seeing with nuts for me is, I can't eat nuts. I've had too many experiences closely related to nuts, and this weird feeling I get with panic attacks and panicking and adrenaline and weird sensations in my body. It's just, it's become too frequent and too correlated at this point. And I had another one a couple days ago. I tried to have cashews, same exact thing happened, that it has happened probably about 10 conscious times now. And so there are bigger themes in our lives that you need to pay attention to with foods that you're eating. It's like, there's a thing, there's such thing as food sensitivity, or things that don't agree with us. Our bodies are all different. Our minds, our psychology, everything is different. So I think you need to have a bigger plan and pay attention to what you're eating overall, to know what direction you want to go in. But also, I think you need to have a real-time negotiation plan, for the real-time moment, because cravings and moods and your body and how it feels, and it changes moment to moment. So you got to have that real-time strategy in place to where you can negotiate with yourself. And I realize you need to have the bigger plan and the real-time plan. And if you lose sight of either, you can go off track. You lose sight of the bigger plan, you can just start eating whatever and start feeling like crap. That's kind of what I feel like I do sometimes, is I just start experimenting with everything again, and then I don't feel good. It's the best way I can explain it. Or you can lose your real-time negotiation and become either a tyrant, or the spirit of the tyrant, or the spirit of the slave. I realize I feel better when I err on the side of structure, but not restriction, not full restriction. I need to allow for some sort of fluidity, some real-time negotiation, but I do thrive when I have rules, when I have discipline. That free-for-all concept just does not work well for me. Some people say, just live, and it's, we got to define what living means to people, right? Because just live is a very different thing for a lot of people, especially when you have certain experiences with food that other people don't. They don't understand it. And then one last thing that was very powerful, like overwhelmingly powerful to me. I'm reading Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life. I kind of skimmed through it once before, but I did not read it mindfully or consciously, or as consciously as I would like to have. And so I'm reading it again. And I'm on Rule 7, which is do something that is meaningful, not expedient. And he talks about, by the way, if you have not read that book, you need to absolutely read it. It is dangerously transformative. Jordan Peterson talks about how other famous psychologists and other figures throughout history, their works are, terrifying in a way that they are just so transformational. Like Carl Jung is one of them. I'm actually going to start on his work in a couple of weeks. But Jordan Peterson, man, his stuff is dangerously transformative. Like my mind is blown after reading that chapter this morning, which is do something meaningful, not expedient. And he talks all about sacrifice, a lot of biblical references, Cain and Abel, a lot of the biblical stories, and I would want to kind of try to explain them right now, but I don't really want to butcher them. I think I need to study them a bit more before I start trying to explain them, because I just don't know them well enough. But this concept of sacrifice has been screaming at me lately. Just screaming. I was reading the whole chapter this morning, and I will talk about this in the episode where I talk about diet. I'm going to actually talk about all the diets that I've tried and what's worked and what didn't and what I learned from all of them, because I've tried many different ones, paleo, vegan, most of the main ones. But one thing I have not tried is keto, and I've been extremely curious about it, because through all the other diets I've tried, I have found a theme, I have found a trend that carbs do not make me feel good. High carb does not make me feel good. In fact, the lower the carbs that I'm eating, the better my cognitive function, the better my mood is, more stable my mood is. The lower the carb, the higher the fat and protein. I just feel like I am on top of the fucking world. And that is interesting, because this morning as I was reading that book, that chapter all about sacrifice and meaning, I just had these voices screaming at me to at least try the keto diet, to do some, like, I don't even see it as long-term. Like, I don't even see it as a sacrifice long-term, but I need to make a radical sacrifice. Food drives me. My addiction around food and binge eating drives every decision. I realized this morning this tripped me out, like majorly tripped me out. I realized this morning that I literally don't forward to anything in my life. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but hear me out on this. I don't look forward to anything in my life, like day trips, vacations, trips to the cabin, a date or whatever. I don't look forward to anything. I look forward to the food that I'm going to be eating when I am there. That is literally how much food drives me. It's like I'm not, I go to the cabin, like we have a family cabin. It's like when I go to the cabin, I'm not really excited to go to the cabin. I'm excited because the tyrant gets to take a vacation and the rebellious slave comes out. And for some reason, I allow myself on all these outings to just binge and eat and do whatever I want. And then that's what I look forward to. And so the problem with that is my mind is so wrapped up around food and the pleasure around food that I literally am not experiencing my life. Like, what other things could I experience? What other pleasures would I be granted? Would I look at nature differently? Would I look at experiences with my family or people I love differently? If I didn't have this concept of food bogging my mind down and just chasing one high after the next, like, what would my life look like if I sacrificed pleasure food? And I asked myself that question this morning. And the keto diet keeps coming up. And I don't even know if it's the keto diet, but it's sacrificing carbs. It's sacrificing the pleasure. It's, the more carbs you eat, or at least I've found, the more I crave them. And then the more I chase them. And then the more my diet becomes dependent on treats and paleo breads and sweet potatoes and just carby, dense, heavy foods. And, what would my life look like if I sacrificed them? And even temporarily, like, the thought of going low carb or removing carbs even temporarily, like for a 30-day or a 45-day thing, terrifies the living daylights out of me. Like, I literally cannot picture my life without baking, without having recreating, like I do a lot of paleo pleasure meals. Like I actually recreated, I don't know if you guys are familiar with The Habit, the Santa Barbara style char at The Habit, but I recreated the entire thing in a paleo version. So with like a cassava flour bread, grass finished beef, and I just made the whole thing paleo mayo, pickles, like I did the whole thing. And I do that a lot because there's a part of me that just loves to binge eat shitty ass food, like pizza and burgers and whatever I can get my hands on. And since I have different standards now with my health, I basically just recreate those binging patterns, but with quote unquote healthy food, but the patterns are still there and I still chase them and they still rule me and they drive me. So what would my life look like without them? And I'm so curious, but so terrified about, I just cannot picture my life without the pleasure eating. I cannot visualize it. And that terrifies me because it's almost a good thing. Like, who would I become if I could shed this part of me? Who would I become? And I was reading the chapter this morning and the voice was screaming at me to sacrifice carbs, even for a short period of time, like 30 days or 60 days. And I think that that's going to be my next step. And I don't want to say I don't know if I can get through it, because that's not a good start. It's not a good start at all. But I'm just terrified of it so much. And I don't even know what I'm terrified of. It's like a part of me that's foreign and that I don't know, but I kind of want to find out. I want to find out. And so maybe that's the next part of this journey, is to try that and see how I feel. And I have a hunch, man, that my cognitive function will improve and I'll feel better. And it's like I also have this little voice that tells me that to get to where I want to go, to tap into maybe a part of creativity that I've never tapped into before and produce what I'm maybe meant to produce in this life, is I gotta make some sacrifices, some big sacrifices and some radical sacrifices. And sacrificing pleasure eating, which is the thing that literally I feel like makes me, it's a large part of me, sacrificing that big of a part of myself, man, I don't know who I would become. And I'm really thinking about it. I'm seriously considering it. Part of me wants to do it after the first of the year because it's easy. It's after the holidays, after all the treats and stuff. And, that's the way that everybody else does it. Part of me wants to start before that so I can have the added challenge. I don't know what I will do, but one thing I do know is that I will keep you guys posted. Um, I'm absolutely loving doing these episodes. This is really cool. Um, I've really found a flow with these things, and I'm very optimistic for the future of this podcast. And I haven't really been able to say that for a lot of my pursuits, my creative pursuits in the past. I always go really hard and then I burn out and then I just stop. And I thought that's what was going to happen with this podcast, but I've just been going and going with these episodes, and um, I've been really liking it. So that's all I really have to say about that. I feel like Forrest Gump. That's what Forrest Gump says, right? I don't know. I just got Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump just came into my consciousness when I said that, so I don't know why. But if not, then whatever. I guess I was just meant to think about Forrest Gump. Um, anyway, well, that's it for my spiel today. If you guys, I was gonna ask for a favor. If you guys are enjoying these episodes, I would love if you guys could leave a review, honest, open review. I'm all about honesty, so don't feel the need to be positive if it's not positive, although, it does kind of suck to get a negative review. The point of reviews is, why I'm asking for reviews is we're creatures of following what other people like or what other people are doing, right? It's kind of hard to get away from that. When you go to look for a podcast, you see what other people are saying about it. If those people kind of feel similar, you feel similar to those people and what they're saying, then you're more inclined to listen. And then the more people that listen, the more people that leave reviews, and then the more my podcast can kind of get out there and the more people that I could reach. And that's my goal. I really want to get data. I want to share my ideas, and I love hearing from people. I actually admire a lot of these people that go on to other podcasts and like the Joe Rogan show, and they're practitioners of their craft, right? They work with people, they hear from people, they have data. They can say, oh, I've talked to 40 different people about binge eating, and this is what people have to say. And they have that data, and that's something I'm lacking in my life right now is I don't really talk to as many people that I would like to talk to, and I kind of am in my own head, in my own world with my own thoughts. And I'm trying to branch out and learn more about other people and share my mind and hear what people have to say. So reviews, emails, any way I can hear from you guys, I love it. The reviews obviously help the show get boosted from a business sense, but I equally love hearing your emails because I want to hear from you and I want to hear your feedback. So anytime you feel called to share something, please do not be shy. Please do not hesitate. I love, like I said, love getting your emails, love hearing from you, love getting the messages. So cool. All right. Well, I love doing this. It is such a good flow that I fall into, and I feel so good after I do these. Oh man. Well, anyway, I'm going to keep you guys posted on what I decide to do for my ultimate sacrifice. That sounded a little bit more silly than I wanted it to. I don't want to disrespect the concept of sacrifice because it is a very serious thing. It's very deep rooted in mythology and history and our ancestors and whatnot. So I'm actually going to take back that stupid little tone that I had with how I said ultimate sacrifice. But anyway, I will keep you guys posted on what I decide to do with that because it is a big thing I've been thinking about, and I'm sure I'll do an episode soon on it. All right. Always feels awkward to end these things, but I'm sure I'll figure it out soon.